Welcome to The Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Welcome back to The Blue Dot podcast, where we unpack the stories shaping Northern Kentucky's political landscape. Today, we're diving into a trio of headlines that are stirring up controversy, concern, and conversation across the Commonwealth. I'm Natalie MacDonald.
And I'm Brian Koehl. From the Epstein files to the defunding of public media and the rising cost of going back to school, these national stories are hitting home right here in Kentucky.
And we're also going to talk about the statewide call to action taking place across the Bluegrass this Sunday and how you can get involved in a massive grassroots initiative taking place this weekend. But first off, one topic that's been dominating the headlines on every platform imaginable is Trump's sudden reversal on the Epstein files and a chain of really bizarre reactions from him, including a dumpster fire press conference today in the Oval Office, where he did everything from calling it a witch hunt to demanding President Obama's arrest, as a distraction, of course, to announcing that his Department of Justice will be meeting with Epstein's former girlfriend and partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently sitting in jail for sex traffic crimes. And yes, there's even a Kentucky connection to all of this.
Yes, and that is U.S. Representative Thomas Massie, who represents Northern Kentucky, has been leading a bipartisan charge to force the release of all unclassified files related to Epstein's criminal network by filing a discharge petition. And that's a rare and difficult maneuver in Congress to bypass leadership and bring the issue to a floor vote. Massie says, quote, "We all deserve to know what's in the Epstein files, who's implicated, and how deep this corruption goes." But this move puts him at odds with President Trump, who wants Republicans to move on from the scandal.
Yeah, and that's not the first time that Massie has, gone head to head with President Trump.
Right.
But this was announced on July 15th, and it looks like since then at least 6 other Republicans have signed on, and that includes Marjorie Taylor Greene, who just posted today that we should all be skeptical of anything Ghislaine Maxwell has to say, because she could be bartering for something. And imagine that, right?
What could that be?
I know. I even texted you a little while ago, Brian. I'm like, he's gonna pardon her, and so we'll see. But that's just my opinion now. But Lauren Boebert and a few others have signed on, but it needs 218 signatures to force a vote. So I guess we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, discharge petitions are usually considered a long shot because the sponsors have to obtain signatures from a majority, or as you said, Natalie, at least 218 House members in support of the petition. And, getting a majority in today's House is difficult, even with bills led by the Speaker and operating under general rules. So obviously a discharge petition, which is essentially getting a bill to a floor vote by going around the Speaker, is rarely successful. And then, even if Massie and his co-sponsor, Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, are able to get the necessary signatures, the earliest the vote could happen is October 21st, and that's because good old Speaker Mike Johnson decided to shut down the House a few days early for the August recess to avoid a vote on the Epstein files. Such courage.
Right.
And it will need to be taken back up when the members return in late September. And in explaining the early shutdown, Johnson said the goal of House Republicans and the president was maximum transparency. Well, that certainly explains why one would shut down the House early to avoid a vote on releasing much sought-after information. Not.
Right? He literally just took his ball and says, "I'm leaving." Right? He's like, "I don't want to talk about this anymore. We're just going to go home."
Yeah, right.
Literally go to recess.
Right.
But, it'll be interesting to see how all this turns out. If this will hurt Massie in the long run. What will those mega PAC commercials look like that are running against him? Today he was basically out there saying, bring it on. He's like, this is a battle Trump will lose. But honestly, there's so much exploding so quickly today that it was hard to keep up with everything. I didn't see all of what he had to say.
Yeah, a couple of hours ago, I was searching around doing a little research for the pod here, and I saw an interview with Massie from earlier today, which we are recording on Tuesday, June 22nd. And he seemed very confident that the discharge petition would get the necessary 218 votes. And in fact, Natalie, you said 6 had signed on earlier. I think this was a later interview, and he said he had about 12 Republicans who were already on board. And he felt that 100% of the Democrats, of course, would say yes. So that would put it well above the required threshold. And to your question about how this might affect Massie's reelection chances in 2026, the Epstein files is central to, the MAGA belief system. So I'm afraid if he is successful in leading the charge and getting the entirety of the Epstein files released to the public, he may take on hero status in MAGA world and become unbeatable. Bad news for us.
I don't know, though. First of all, I don't have any faith that it'll all be released in the first place.
Yeah.
But let's just say it does. I think the diehard Trumpers just won't leave him. I've spoken to people who are already aligning with his claims that this is a hoax. But at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, much of the grand jury testimony can't legally be released, hence the reason I think it hasn't been done already. But the problem is this rabid MAGA flank of the party, including Trump Jr. and all these other MAGA mouthpieces out there, were stoking these conspiracy theories for so long, and they just kept throwing gas on it leading up to the 2024 election. And essentially, Trump was feeding this to his base as an appetizer. And then when it came to dinner, he served up an empty plate, right? So it just remains to be seen who stays at the table. It's going to be interesting.
Nice metaphor. Yeah, that's right. And, it's hard to fathom how there can be so much evidence of the long and close relationship Trump had with Jeffrey Epstein. Multiple photos of them together, including one famous, buddy shot of them with Trump with his arm around Epstein's shoulder. And the video I'm sure many have seen of the two looking like true predators, ogling young women on the dance floor at Mar-a-Lago, lewdly gesturing and commenting. Magazine interviews in which both discuss their mutual friendship, including the now infamous New York Magazine interview in which Trump claimed Epstein likes beautiful women as much as he does, but Epstein especially likes them on the younger side. And the fact that Epstein and his girlfriend groomer, as we have mentioned before, Ghislaine Maxwell, lived down the street from Trump's Mar-a-Lago and would frequent that club to recruit young women who worked and partied there. I mean, all these connections, with all this clear, documented evidence that these two men shared a lot of time and activities together, that the MAGA core somehow does not believe or get that Trump might be massively implicated in some seriously nasty and illegal stuff, should this full set of files ever become publicly available. They are so obsessed with exposing the liberal, leftist, pedophilic cabal that they are sure.
It's interesting because I was literally just talking to a diehard Trump supporter about an hour ago. And she said this would be her tipping point. She's like, absolutely, 100%. And that's great, but why now? With all the things that you just mentioned, they know what he had done. They know he bragged on Howard Stern about lurking after young girls at his teen pageant dressing rooms, right?
Right.
Like,
Gross.
so did they really not think he was a horrible human being then? I don't know. But really, this is just all an example. It's a dark example of what seems to be kind of that central trait of the whole MAGA regime, and that's the inability to think ahead. Kind of like I said earlier, Donald Trump and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and all of them were like pushing this conspiracy theory to gain immediate power and votes, but they didn't think ahead to what happens when they actually get the power, right? So now they're completely in charge, not the deep state. They can release the files as they promised. No one's going to stop them. But they never thought ahead to this moment and how to handle it. It's like the dog that finally catches the car.
Right.
It doesn't know what to do with it, Brian. So, hence all of this crazy chaos, right?
Right.
I mean, it's the same with all of what they've done. It's like the tariffs. They never thought, I never thought about the negative economic impact that the tariffs might have,
Right. It's the same with firing huge numbers of federal employees. I never realized that what these people did was critical to basic government functions.
Yeah, in FEMA, right? What'll happen when there's a natural disaster after they've been saying that FEMA must be eliminated all of this time,
Yeah, it's the same with deportations. I guess I didn't know these people actually held jobs and consumed products and services that kept the economy running.
And don't forget about vaccine denial, right? Mm-hmm. Now the measles and whooping cough and polio and all of these things that didn't exist are back.
Right. I thought those no longer existed, just like medical research. I guess if I hadn't cut funding to that cancer research, My sister, who now has cancer, might actually have had an effective treatment available to her, and on and on and on.
I mean, that's right. It's just so sad. And I think the lesson here is that, the mega cult and the Republicans that have been Trump's lapdog all this time, they're just not good at governance. That's all that's to it, I think.
That's exactly right. And this story ties into another major issue, the recently passed Rescissions Act of 2025. Representative Massie tried to stall it. Once again, why am I liking Thomas Massie?
Right? He needs to come on. We'd love to talk to you.
I have some memes out there that, they're calling him a Democrat, so who knows what's going on here. It's all topsy-turvy. But Massie tried to force more transparency, but ultimately Trump threw his supporters a bone, promising more Epstein disclosures in exchange for letting the bill move forward.
Yeah, and for those not familiar, a rescissions vote is a formal process to cancel previously approved federal funding that hasn't been spent yet. So it's kind of like promising your kids allowance, but then taking it back after they already did their chores. It takes back budget authority that was already appropriated, but remains unspent. So this one in particular has profound impacts on Kentucky. And one of the most pivotal aspects is that access to public media.
That rescissions package was ultimately approved, and what this does is rescind $8.3 billion from global assistance and humanitarian response efforts, further dismantles USAID, which I don't know how they can possibly dismantle that any further, and gets over $1 billion from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is a lifeline for NPR, PBS, and KET, Kentucky Educational Television.
Yeah, again, just not thinking this through. They sold this whole defund NPR thing as some great antidote to what they perceive as a biased public programming. But the reality is NPR and Elmo aren't really going to get hit, right? Because only about 2% of their funding comes from this pot of money. But what's really going to hurt is the $11 million in funding that is at risk for Kentucky alone. And in rural Kentucky, that's not just about, small town news. It's about emergency alerts and early childhood education and local culture. It's really sad.
And it's really a big deal because in rural areas, like much of eastern and western Kentucky, public broadcasting is often the only source for emergency alerts, educational programming, and local news.
Yeah, and we just saw some tornadoes again this week, and in a state that's already seen 48 major tornadoes this year, cutting off emergency broadcasting systems is just another gut punch, right? Once again, they're defunding the heart of America, and also that those sitting on the top can have more.
Yeah, 48 tornadoes. It seems the lesson of the tragic flooding just recently in central Texas, which resulted in at least 135 deaths, many of those deaths children, have not been learned. The lack of an early warning system and coordinated emergency communications contributed to that large death toll, and now here we are flirting with the exact same scenario again right here in Kentucky. And just as we're hoping to move out of disaster season and into back to school season, another crisis hits.
That's right. Back to school and all of the education cuts that have been happening. We can't forget that at the end of June, Trump decided to tell states that he is holding back $6.8 billion. That's $1 billion that was previously earmarked to go to the K through 12 schools. And in Kentucky alone, just Kentucky, that comes out to $96 million that was promised to our state that got held back.
Yeah, schools were supposed to start receiving the bulk of that money on July 1st. And, the really unfortunate part is, since this funding has been ripped away from schools so late in the year, that money was already planned for and allocated to school budgets. And not only are schools now scrambling to make up for these lost funds or make last-second adjustments to their spending plans, the cost of school supplies is increasing due to the tariffs and inconsistent supply chains. Teachers are digging into their own pockets to try to make ends meet in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think we all know teachers, right? And they all, have a summer story. We were at the Kenton County Fair last week, and I will tell you what, I think every teacher who was there came up and talked to us. We had our pre-K for all signs out, and they all were coming up saying, please, 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 help make this happen.
That sign was like magnetic. They would start to walk by, and I just sucked them in, and we got into some great conversations about that. And it really just again, supported the need for something like that, how important that is to the children, and also to enable parents to get more fully back into the workforce. And just think about how that benefits not only their own personal economies, but the state economy overall.
Yeah, that economic impact is huge,
Yep.
But as far as these cuts go, once again, we have Governor Beshear out there trying to do whatever he can. I swear to God, I liken him to Batman. He just always shows up when people need him, So he joined more than 20 state officials in a lawsuit, basically claiming the freeze was illegal. And because of that, they were forced to release just a portion of those funds. So Kentucky got back $19.7 million, and that's great, but it's a far cry from the $96 million that we were shorted.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. The Trump administration, with support from Kentucky's GOP delegation, also ended the Local Food for Schools Cooperative Agreement program, which awarded schools funds to buy food from local farmers to help feed children in public schools.
Yeah, and Brian, there's a similar program, the Local Food Purchase Agreement program, and that would have provided an additional $5.9 million to Kentucky farmers so that food banks could purchase local produce from them. Both the Schools Cooperative Agreement program and the Food Purchase Agreement program are run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, through which school lunch funding is generally distributed to the states.
Yeah, let's pause and think about the multiple impacts cuts to these local food programs result in. First off, schools lose access to a food source. School kids lose healthy meals consisting of fresh, locally grown meats and produce. Lower income families lose access to healthy foods. And farmers lose an income stream. I mean, tell me, who is benefiting from this? How does this possibly make sense as policy to anyone?
Yeah, it doesn't. And that's the thing. And, our farmers are really getting hit, between the tariffs on things like fertilizer and machinery, food ingredients. They're also seeing a reduction in demand for Kentucky grown products like soybeans, corn, and tobacco, and now this. And when you listen to the farmers, I've seen them interviewed, they're saying this is a huge blow to the farming community.
Yeah, I mean, come on, Republicans. How do you live with yourselves knowing you are actively and purposefully hurting your constituents? I mean, shame is not a strong enough word for the actions of the GOP, both federal and state. It borders on immorality, especially knowing that these cuts are not a collective sacrifice endured by all, but rather a transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich through massive tax cuts benefiting the wealthy, along with, to make it, the final knife in the heart, adding to our national debt instead of reducing it.
And that's the kicker, right? The Republicans have always said, we're for, small government and reduction of the national debt, but they're not doing that. They're just doing all the bad parts of it while exploding the debt. So it's crazy.
Yeah, if this was happening and we all saw a plan that it would get us into more fiscal responsibility and further support, our really important programs like Social Security and Medicare, et cetera, the really expensive programs, I think we would all be on board with it. And, it could really bring the nation together. But instead, it's splitting us even further apart as it's becoming like class warfare.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And with all of this going on, I get asked a lot, what are the Dems doing about this? Well, this is where we like to bring everybody into the call to action to highlight really what the Dems are doing and how everybody can join the movement. So first of all, I talked a little bit earlier about this huge statewide Democrat Day of Action that's going to take place this weekend. It's a great opportunity to get involved and make a difference by joining the Kenton County Democrats on July 27th. And this is also happening in Campbell and Boone and all the other counties in the state. So if you're in another county, go check out their websites to get involved, or you could join us, the Kenton Dems. You don't have to live in Kenton County to be a part of the outreach, but this is really a cool chance to get to connect with fellow Democrats and have meaningful conversation with voters and help build a stronger, more engaged Democratic Kentucky. So we'll provide everything you need, training materials, canvas lists, and all kinds of support. So whether you're kind of like the seasoned volunteer or brand new, you'll be able to hit the ground running with this really great event that's coming up this weekend. We're really excited about it. But we are not all work and no play. On July 31st at 6:45, the Kenton Dems will have a happy hour at the Ludlow Bromley Yacht Club. And I have not been there, Brian. I don't know if you have since they've come back, but I'm super excited to see it.
All I know is like way back in the day, I had a group of friends and some in-laws, brothers-in-laws and all their friends used to go down there and hang out, and they loved it. So I have not been there, but I heard it's pretty cool.
Oh, it is a treat. So we'll hopefully we'll see you there. And also be on the lookout as we're planning our yearly fall fundraiser in September. So we'll be sending out information about that, which will actually also be at the Ludlow Bromley Yacht Club. And you can check out all of our upcoming events at KentonCountyDemocrats.org. You can RSVP there for the events. Bring a friend, and let's keep fighting for a Kentucky that works for everyone. What do you have on your calendar, Brian?
Well, following up from the last pod, my wife and I attended the Good Trouble Lives On rally at Cincinnati City Hall last Thursday evening. I'd estimate there were 250 to 300 people there at its peak, and people were pretty fired up, and there was tons of camaraderie. One of the speakers focused on how we must be joyful in our work, protesting the corrupt, autocratic Trump regime and its blatant lawlessness and greed. And I would say there was a lot of joy. As I've said before, these demonstrations may seem intimidating to those who have never gone, but you actually meet and mingle with many kind and passionate people, true patriots in my mind. I've always come away more hopeful than when I went in. I did not check to see how many demonstrations there were nationwide last Thursday, but there were several across the country last Saturday, and I've also seen more and more spontaneous gatherings of people, on news and podcasts that I watch, YouTube videos, gatherings of people with signs directly calling out, for instance, local ICE deportation raids, funding cuts to any number of services or workforces. For instance, one in New York City at the CBS studios where Colbert records The Late Show, protesting his firing by CBS, ostensibly due to CBS's capitulation to Trump. Despicable. Do not capitulate. Our next big date and your opportunity to let your voice be heard is August 2nd, and this nationwide movement is labeled as Rage Against the Regime. And man, as a longtime Rage Against the Machine fan, I love, love, love that title. Keep an eye on the 5051 website to see where local events will be held. And finally, I think this is a really interesting and important undertaking by indivisible.org. They've put together an online training series to teach people the tools and tactics for fighting authoritarianism. And this is comprised of 3 sessions, and you can attend them live via Zoom as they occur or watch recorded versions if the live sessions don't fit your schedule. Indivisible's goal is to train 1 million people. The first session is already passed, but you can find the link on indivisible.org's website. It's very visible right there on their homepage. And the next session coming up is July 30th, and the final live stream is August 13th. So please consider watching these videos and becoming more informed and more effective in combating those who are striving to destroy our democracy. Keep the faith, everyone, and keep fighting.
That's amazing to see all of these events and people are showing up. And I think it just goes to show that I keep talking about visibility as key, and it
Right.
is. And we can see it, we can feel it everywhere.
That's right. It makes a difference. Don't believe that it doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. People are fired up. So anyway, that is it for this week. Thank you so much for joining the Blue Dot Podcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks to bring you up to speed with all things political in Kenton County and beyond. And don't forget, you can join the conversation at our Facebook and Instagram pages or at bluedotpodcast.com. And of course, if you like listening to the podcast, consider donating to help fund it, which you can do by clicking on the donate link at bluedotpodcast.com. Until next time, stay curious, keep the facts in focus, and never stop fighting for what matters. Peace out, everybody.